To discuss the U.S.-Mexico trade talks, we're joined by George See. He's the CEO of Annandale Capital. George, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Michelle. Good to be here.
George, Dan Raviv seems optimistic. Are you optimistic that there will be some kind of deal reached before those tariffs kick in June 10th?
Very optimistic. I don't know if by June 10th is the proper deadline, but Mexico's got a lot more to lose than we do through this. But being a seventh-generation Texan and a very close friend to Senator Cornyn and Senator Thune, who succeeded Senator Cornyn as the #2 Republican in the Senate, I know they're firmly against this, and they're going to press the administration to wind this up and focus on the real trade problem, which is China.
Well, it's a point that the U.S. is using tariffs to tackle a number of issues right now. And whilst one can agree with the idea that Mexico should be pressured to do more about enforcing its immigration policies and trying to curb the flow of illegal immigrants into the U.S., can the U.S. engage in a tariff war on at least two fronts?
I think that we learned the hard way, or at least the Germans learned the hard way in World War II, that two-front wars don't work out so well, especially two-front or multi-front wars. So I'd like to see us end this very rapidly with Mexico and pivot back to China, because at the end of the day, the American consumer and American working men and women will suffer eventually from this by increased inflation, increased costs on what they have to buy day to day.
But the president, many would argue, has a point. Mexico does need to do more here. He's not getting much help from Congress in trying to stem the border crisis. There is a crisis, and economically it's costing the U.S. a lot. By some estimates, at least according to FAIR, it's costing illegal immigration is costing the U.S. $175 billion a year. So, yeah, it's going to hurt the U.S. economy if these tariffs are imposed, but can the U.S. afford not to do anything?
I think we have to do something, but I think mixing your metaphors, mixing trade policy with border security policy is a mistake. It confuses people, it gets different people involved, different actors, and I think we needed a straight message on border security separate and apart from trade policy. And Mexico is our #1 trading partner. The president said in Britain this week that Britain was #1, but they're actually 7. Mexico's 1, Canada's 2. China's 3rd. It's incumbent upon us to have a good relationship with Mexico and a free flow of goods.
Do you see Mexico retaliating with tariffs of their own if there isn't a deal reached or as part of these negotiations?
I think if we play hardball, that's a possibility, but I think they're maybe not desperate for a deal yet, but they're very motivated to come to terms quickly. And they'll throw the president a sop of some form of additional border security. It probably won't be enough to solve that issue or even come close to that, but it'll be a step in the right direction.
Are there opportunities in the markets here for investors with all of this volatility and uncertainty and the president's general push for Americans to make goods in America, be it regarding China or Mexico? I mean, that's the message that he's trying to send. Could there be an opportunity here for American companies and therefore for American investors?
The biggest opportunity for American companies and investors is natural gas. Most people are completely unaware that we ship 4 to 5 billion cubic feet of natural gas into Mexico every single day. And that's going to double over the next 5 years, and it's an incredible economic boondoggle for our country. If we get in a tariff war, that's threatened. The Mexicans could retaliate with large tariffs against our natural gas flows, and they really need it because their state oil company, Pemex, has been basically not quite mothballed, but pretty close to that, and they completely rely on us for that. So everybody's got a huge incentive to get this worked out.
But if it doesn't get worked out, I mean, what's your worst case scenario in terms of the hit on the U.S. GDP?
Well, one thing I admire about the president is that he is fearless, but he's also reckless, and he's also ad hoc in the way he does his policies. And if he keeps using the tariffs as a blunt instrument to further his agenda, we could get in all sorts of trade wars with all sorts of different countries, and the whole global economic system could go into recession. So that's the big downside here, and it's got to be avoided. And the way to do that is to wind up with Mexico and focus on the Chinese and their lying, cheating, and stealing over 3 decades with the rest of the world, and they need to come to terms and behave like a responsible member of the international community.
But do you see a resolution with China happening anytime soon?
I think by the end of the year, there's a good chance, yeah. They basically tried a fast one because they thought through the president's tweets that he was worried about the strength of their economy, and that was a terrible misread on their part. And that's why they tried to completely alter the deal at the last minute. And there's a lot of ill will and lack of trust between the two sides right now. We need to let the Chinese save some face in terms of how the agreement is reached, but we need to quietly behind the scenes go back to ironing out that deal. And it's not that complicated.
Could you trust them? Any deal? I mean, they had a deal, they rejected the deal, they apparently agreed to things and then backpedaled. Are the Chinese ever going to be trusted with any deal?
Well, the beauty of it is we've got so much leverage with the Chinese because they ship 3 to 4 times the amount of goods to us and services as we do to them. So they're more motivated than we are to reach a deal, and their economy and their people are going to suffer more than ours will if this remains unresolved. So they may have a lot of brave posturing on the surface, but they're very motivated to get this done after a pregnant pause for everybody to regain their composure.
All right, you're optimistic as well. Thank you so much,
Always so.
George C., CEO of Annandale Capital. Appreciate it.
Thank you.